Hey everyone, this is Brian Lorman. You may remember me from orientation a few weeks ago. I'm the project director for Code Louisville. And yeah, unfortunately, I couldn't make it out to class tonight. I have a immunocompromised person in my life, unfortunately, so I'm pretty much isolated at home these days. Um, so I wanted to record this video and talk to you all about the project requirements for Code Louisville and just give you an idea of what to expect, what to be thinking about, and show you some examples so you can start thinking of ideas about what you're going to do this time around or for this class. So yeah, let me share my screen here, and I've got some slides and some samples to show you. And I'll just kind of walk through some of the stuff, and I'm always available on Slack if you have questions there, or your mentor should be able to help you out, Daniel or David, depending on which class you're in, or both. They're both in the Slack channel. Um, and yeah, we'll figure out something cool to work on. So let's see. There we go. So yeah, so this is a guide to the Code Level projects. And like I said, we're going to talk about the requirements, show some examples. I've got some tips, and then finally, how do we finish off the project and turn it in? So, first of all, the purpose of the project is to reinforce and show off what you know to potential employers. So, there's two major things in here. First of all, to reinforce what you know. You cannot learn programming without programming. You have to write code. You can watch videos all day long, but if you're not actually applying what you've watched, you're not going to learn it. So we have you build bare minimum one project so that you have at least one practice of building a project. But we really hope that you're building like a ton of projects. Like I would hope that you're building like at least one a week, like based on whatever you did in Treehouse that week. Um, but yeah, you're going to have one final project that is due and it's reviewed and everything. And the other reason you want to build this project is to show off to employers. You are presumably in this program to get a job. That's what we're all here for. And this is going to be like your best ammunition for it. Your project again is going to reinforce what you know. You know, you're going to learn things by doing it, which will allow you to talk better about what you do. But many employers will also ask for these. They will ask to see a project sometimes in an interview, sometimes before or after, things like that. They'll want to see some actual code. And when you take a job readiness workshop, either um, with us on the Louisville side or with Work One, one of the things they're going to emphasize is that your GitHub portfolio, where you're going to display your projects, should be one of the first things visible on your resume, um, because that's what employers look for. They want to see that you actually are writing some code. So yeah, so that's what we're doing here, and that's what Code Louisville is all about. So I want to jump right into the requirements. Now, you all are still early on. It's only week 3 of 12. You haven't covered everything yet. To many of you, this is still brand new. So as I go through some of this stuff, you might think, I don't quite understand what he just said. Don't worry about it too much. First of all, ask tons of questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Second of all, you're going to get through some more content, and this will make better sense. Mainly, I just wanted to go through the requirements to give you an idea of what to expect and what to be thinking about, and then encourage you to go read the full requirements, which is linked here, and I'll put these slides in Slack. It's also linked on the first page of your syllabus. That very first page should have a link out to all the project requirements, and everybody needs to read those at some point. Don't take this presentation as the final end-all requirements because there's more details. There's like some clarifications and stuff like that in the written requirements, which um, you can see right here. Here's that document that's linked. It breaks down all these requirements, gives you a whole list of things that we'll talk about here in a minute, and a bunch of like commonly asked questions and stuff like that. So the requirements, basically, what you're going to see as I go through these is that they are pretty open-ended. There's some specific things we're looking for, but as far as what can you build, you can build anything you want as long as it's a website, a responsive website, and it meets these requirements. So the first one is that you have to use what's called mobile first design. This is how Treehouse teaches, and it's a very good principle to follow. And basically, what it means is that you build a website with the idea of a mobile device first. That's the primary view, the way you expect most people to view it. And then you use your CSS to make your site visible or better, easier to use on larger screens like tablets and desktops. You may or may not be surprised to know that the vast majority of web traffic is mobile these days. It is not people on their computers and laptops. It is mobile traffic. And so building that with mobile in mind is what we're looking for. So what does that mean? If you ask 5 developers what mobile first design means, you're going to get 7 definitions. So in our case, what it means is that you have media queries in your CSS that scale up your site. So the default in your CSS is assuming you're looking at it on mobile. And then you're going to have some media queries, 2, in fact, minimum 2, that scale up to larger sizes. So you're going to have at least 2 queries, one that's probably around a tablet size or a small laptop or desktop screen, and then one that's for larger screens or something like that. It doesn't have to be that exactly. But we need to look at your CSS and see that you have media queries that say, okay, on this larger screen, now do this. And on this larger screen, now do this other thing. It can be simple stuff like moving, items around or aligning them differently, things like that. It doesn't have to be some crazy complete redesign of your site, but we need to see that you're making some actual impact, some actual change on your site's layout with these media queries. Yeah, so moving on, the next one is that your project is going to have to be uploaded to GitHub. So you've already started learning about that. You've been through some videos. You've had a demonstration in class. Some of you may have already gotten it, and you're like, yeah, this is nothing. Some of you are probably still struggling with it, and that's totally normal. It's very, very normal to be struggling with Git and GitHub right now. It's something very different from anything you may have done before. But nonetheless, it is an expected skill in most development offices, and thus we expect you to learn it. And so what we're going to look for is when you turn your project in, you're basically just going to give us a link to it on GitHub. You're going to give us that repository, it's called. And we're going to look at that. We're going to pull down all your code so that we can review it. And we're also going to look at your history and verify that you have used Git to push code to your GitHub portfolio at least 5 times. You must make at least 5 different commits. And when I say 5 different ones, I don't mean 5 files that you commit at one time. I mean like on 5 different occasions, you've made updates to your project on GitHub. You've pushed some code changes. My hope is that you would use GitHub a ton, and I will see dozens or more commits, but 5 is the minimum we're looking for. So if I log in, or if I go to your repository and I see that you just uploaded your code, the day before it was due, and you just pushed it that one time, it's not going to pass. The next one, your project includes a README file. So README is just a simple little file. It's called readme.md for markdown, or readme.txt for text. And if you put this in your project file at the top of your project directory, GitHub will find that file and display it on your GitHub page, and it will describe your project. And so what we're looking for in that README is just a simple file that says what your project is. It can be, 2 or 3 sentences, if that's all it takes, saying, hey, this is Brian's development portfolio site where he shows off his CSS and JavaScript projects that he builds, something like that. You also have to describe in your README what features your project has that meet these requirements down here. So I'm going to table that one for just a second, but in short, you have to list off how you meet the next 3 requirements. And this last one I always have to put in here because there's always somebody ambitious in every class who decides to do something really cool, but it sometimes requires some special requirements. So for the typical project, you can ignore this. But if you go and include some PHP code for example, maybe you learned it on your own, you have a background in it, something like that. If I have to compile something, download something, install something, anything like that, you have to put special requirements to run your project in your README. I need to know how to run your project. There's going to be tons of these projects turned in, and I don't have hours to spend on every single one of them trying to figure out how to run them. But again, most people, I will just be able to open your project by opening the folder and double-clicking on index.html or something like that. All right, and now we get to the meat. What do you have to build? Like, what features do you have to build on your site? And the answer is you got lots of choices. But what we want to see is that you at least do some CSS and JavaScript. We don't want to see somebody doing a purely CSS site, and we don't want somebody to do only JavaScript. We want to see that you can make them both work together. And so we've created a couple lists. We've created a CSS feature list, and we created a JavaScript feature list. And we've said that you have to do three of them. Minimum one from the CSS list, one from the JavaScript list, and one from either of the lists. And I'm going to switch back over to this document, and that's where you'll see these. So, yeah. So in the CSS features list, we've got a bunch of bullets. In the JavaScript feature list, we got a bunch of bullets. And you have to go through and pick three things, one from each of these, and then another from either. They include all kinds of stuff that Treehouse covers, and even a few things that Treehouse doesn't cover. So I'm not going to read all these things off to you word for word, but basically you can create like a navigation menu that expands and collapses, sometimes called a hamburger menu. You can use Flexbox or CSS Grid to swap elements around and change columns into 1 and 2 column layouts. You can use Bootstrap. You can use inth child or inth of type, which is a CSS thing you'll learn towards the end of the class, to like style things based on a formula or a pattern. You can do a web accessibility compliance. So if you are more on if you like to document or something like that, or you want to build an accessible site, you can do a compliance audit on yourself. And there's things you can go through on your site to make sure that it's accessible to people with different kinds of accessibility challenges. CSS animations is something you'd have to research on your own since it's not covered in the required track, but it's something really cool to learn. JavaScript works the same way, just a lot of different stuff. So you can do create forms that validate fields, functions, and do like math operations, use arrays, create loops, create a bunch of variables and use them, create an object, um, and store some values in it, show and hide content areas. There's and rearrange items by clicking or dragging. So, not all those are going to make sense right now. That's totally fine. And even added in a little thing down here that says if you've got a really cool idea, but it doesn't fall under one of these bullets, let us know. Talk to your mentor, talk to me. We'll be happy to look at it, and we can potentially add a new bullet to this list or give an exception if you've got something cool. We don't want to stifle creativity. That's the big thing. We want you to build a project that is of interest to you. We want you to pick something you want to work on. And for that reason, we don't specify, you must build this kind of site. And so if you feel like you've got this great idea, but it just doesn't work with our requirements, just let us know. We'll be happy to find something to, to work with you on. So those are the requirements. Again, you need to read this document at some point. Go back, in a couple weeks or so, once you get some more under your belt, and that should answer a lot of questions. So what can we build? I've said it a couple times at this point, but you can build anything as long as it's a website. We're in a front-end web development class. We're building websites, so that's what we expect. But within that context, you can do whatever you want. We recommend, when possible, to find something that is of interest or use, or that solves a problem, just because those can really help lead your development. Like if you're solving a problem, you know what you need next. I need to do this. How do I do that? If you're just kind of hodgepodging random things together, well, those tend to not be designed well because you don't have an end goal in mind, things like that.
So try and find something of use, a goal to work towards. Um, it can be something totally unique, something that you came up with on your own, or you can rebuild an existing site. You can just find another site that exists out there and take your own shot at it, try and do it better or different. Whatever you want. But in the past, we've had people do everything from business websites, for their own personal business, their family business, a fictitious business that they made up, a real business. Like we've had people recreate local companies just for fun. Organizations, nonprofits and clubs and things like that. Um, we've had people create some web games, just very simple, basic games. Um, create it for their churches, you name it. Had somebody create an entire site around their child's crown drawings, um, and it was really good. You know, it was illustrated by a 5-year-old, but the technology behind it was great. So, um, one of my personal favorites that I always like to recommend is a personal development blog. And so, what I mean by that is what can be a great tool for you in your career is creating a blog about your learning journey. So you create a blog entry about this new project you created. You know, hey, I just built this CSS project and I learned how to do animations. And here's an example of this cool animation I did. And you know, I found this challenging and that was easy and things like that. That shows an employer that you're thinking about what you're doing. You know, you are building things, you're practicing code, and you're writing about it. You're thinking about what you just did and how to do it better. So that's always a personal recommendation of mine. I brought some examples that I'm going to show you, and also we've got a YouTube channel. So let me switch over here. Real quick, that YouTube channel, it's just Code Louisville on YouTube. And we've got a few different things. Like there's some recorded Git and GitHub videos here. I'm just want to point that out why I've got it on screen, like this one here. And a Slack tutorial if you'd like to learn more about Slack. But the other thing I want to point out is that in the past, we had a bunch of students record some videos of their projects and they presented them. And this is outdated. This was done like 5 years ago, it looks like. But it's still relevant. There's still some good ideas to look through here and see what other people have done. Just note that the project requirements have changed from 5 years ago, so some of these may not technically meet the requirements these days. But yeah, there's a place you can get some more ideas. And then I brought a few projects from the last class to show off. So this one, they just called it Skywatcher. They just wanted to build kind of a gallery site and add a few features in that they want to build on in the future. So they created a login. This is a form. And since this is just a front-end class, we're not doing all the server-side stuff. This password is what's called a mockup. It sort of works, but not like you would actually want it in the real world. So if I try and sign in, it's going to say I have an incorrect password. And then if I put in the correct one, it's going to let me in. So they use some JavaScript there to check on some things, and it's reading from a file and seeing if the login is correct. And then we've got a gallery here, and they've got some basic animations that they've got going on. And where they put a lot of effort in is in their responsive design. So my screen is about to shift, and what I'm doing is I'm switching into a responsive simulator in Firefox. So in Firefox, I hit Control Shift M, and it's put me into responsive mode here, and I can pick a small size and simulate a small device. Chrome does the exact same thing. I believe the hotkey is Control Shift I, and that should allow you to mess with this. But yeah, you can see when I switch between it, several things are happening. My gallery is going from kind of spread out using Flexbox to organize it, and then they sort into a single column here. And then my menu changed as well. So we went from a expanded menu to what's sometimes called the hamburger menu. And yeah, so that's they got some media queries handling all that, and some CSS, some JavaScript that's all being used. Nothing too crazy. Just I thought this was a good demonstration of several good features and a great way to build a project that you can expand on in the future, like that login screen. Maybe one day they'll build a database that it checks against instead of just reading from a file. So this next one, another gallery, but they took a different approach with it. This one is reading from a file to populate this. So they didn't put up every one of these images and words manually. They don't have a lot of HTML in their code. It's very minimal. But what they're doing is they wrote a bunch of JavaScript that reads from a file and displays these dynamically. So right now it's sorting by genres and it's showing all of them. So it just reads through this file, finds every book that's in it, and then they've written JavaScript that displays the image, displays the title, displays the author, and so on. And then it loops through and does the next one. Loops through, does the next one. And they've added this filter in. So if I want to see all the fiction books, you'll see that a bunch of them disappeared. or like horror. There's only a couple of them, and there's that's a JavaScript function that's executing and re-rendering this. Um, and they also used, I believe, Flexbox for this. So right now it's in a 5-column mode, and if I go down to a small screen, it's 2 columns, and it even recognizes, with different media queries and whatnot, how many to display based on what size we are. So another cool one. This next one, they took a different approach. This one's very minimalistic, but there's a lot of JavaScript going on in the back on the back side of things here. This is like a math puzzle. So it's called Fermi Pico Bagel, and I admit I had never heard of it before, but it is a real thing if you Google it. And it's like a guessing game, logic guessing game. So you guess some numbers, and you hit guess, and it says 241 has 1 pico in it, and 1 pico is I have a correct number, but it's in the wrong position. So maybe it's 412. Still one, and 124. So now I've got 1 Fermi. So now I know one of these numbers is in the right place. And every time I guess this, it's checking that and just figuring out. It's doing a math comparison to figure out if I have something correct, and then displaying the details to me. I'm not going to solve this for you on camera, but if you give up, 304. So it looks like that 4 was at least one of the correct ones. But just like all the others, it's responsive. So if I take this down to a small screen, you'll see, there we go. There's the switch to a vertical style. And yeah, this one was really good demonstration of JavaScript, but enough CSS to meet that requirement. The next one I always have to show because I would feel bad if I didn't show it, even though I'm embarrassed about it. It's my own. When I did this class almost 5 years ago now at this point. Actually, more than 5 years. Yeah, 2015. So this I just did a site about my work and experience and stuff like that at the time. And so I've got like a JavaScript / CSS image carousel up here that scrolls through a bunch of stuff. And then a bunch of different columns. And you'll see when I go into responsive mode that the whole site is going to orient itself around mobile. Or I built this mobile first. So first of all, got my hamburger menu here, and everything's in a 1-column layout now. And so that's basically how I designed this, is with 1 column in mind, and then I use something called Bootstrap, which is an optional video, one we recommend you take towards the end, but it's not required. But Bootstrap really helps with this column type layout. So that's the thing I did, and then I also added something called a lightbox, which is some JavaScript stuff. And so when I click on these, it just pops up the images of some of the places I've been. And yeah, so that's my project. So those are pretty much all the examples I brought to show you. There's tons of other things you can do. Don't feel restricted by what I showed. But yeah. So this is taking me a while, so I know you all want to get back to class, so let me try and breeze through this real quick. A few tips. First of all, it always helps when you come up with a plan. That plan can be written down on paper, in words. That plan can be images that you draw or mock up on your computer. You can do it with paper and pencil. Like, that's a great way to start a project. I want my image up here, and my menu is going to be over here, and I'm going to display XYZ here. It helps so much to have a plan for what you want to do. And you can review that plan with your mentor. You can show it to them and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about, and they can look at it and help you decide if it's too big of a project for this class, or maybe too small, or maybe there's a better way to tackle something. Don't reinvent the wheel. What I mean by that is it is very common to look at how other people have done things in the web development world and modify them for your own purpose. So it is perfectly acceptable to go out there and research, how do I create a lightbox where it pops up the image and grays out the background and stuff like that, and look at other people's code and reuse that. The important thing is that you understand why it works the way it does and how it integrates with your project. If you're just blindly copying, pasting, and you hope it works, and oh, great, it worked. Well, you didn't learn anything there, and you may have committed some form of plagiarism. But if you look at that code and maybe borrow a small piece of it and then change some things to work with your project, that's great. That's fantastic. Um, that's what developers do quite a lot. So don't waste a whole lot of time, researching every minute detail. Learn from the greats and integrate. Don't get hung up on content. So what I mean by this is we are here to check your technology skills and learning, not your ability to write or take pictures or any of that stuff. So don't build a blog site and spend hours and hours and hours writing tons of blogs or taking a bunch of photos or anything like that. And to that uh, end, there are some tools that help developers with these kinds of things. So it's very common in the development world that the person developing the website or the application is not the person putting the content in. In bigger companies, they may have like a marketing team or a design team or something like that. And you build the site without knowing what's going to be in it. You just know there's going to be some pictures and some text and stuff like that. And so there's this practice called lorem ipsum. It's an old Latin poem that has been jumbled up. And it started in the print days, like early newspaper and magazine printing days. And all it is just gibberish text, basically. And we don't care. Employers don't care either. They're not hiring you for your writing skills. They're hiring you for your coding skills. So if I pull up your site and it's just a bunch of like lorem ipsum, gibberish, um, something like this, lorem ipsum solar or dolor sit. I can't do Latin, but if that's what you've got, totally fine. We don't care. We're here to look at your code, not your writing ability. And if Latin's a little too boring for you, and you want something a little happier, there's Bob Ross Ipsum, and it'll get you some nice happy little text. The internet loves these kinds of tools. They create all kinds of weird and wacky things, and that goes for images as well. So if you're creating a bunch of images or something and you don't have them ready yet, you haven't taken the picture, you haven't found the file, whatever the case is, placeholder.com will create these exciting gray boxes. It's a simple line of code. Like that line of code right there will act like an image with a 150 pixel um, square size to it. You know, that right there. And you can change that number, and it gives you all kinds of examples of stuff you can do. You can change colors, all kinds of stuff. So again, we're not going to judge your ability to take photos or anything like that. If you want gray boxes as placeholders until you have more time to go find those images, great. And if gray boxes are too boring for you, there's Place Kitten if you want pictures of cats. There's also Place Cage if you want something a little more wild. That gives you pictures of Nick Cage, and my personal favorite, Phil Murray, for pictures of Bill Murray. And also, the last tool I'll show you is there are all kinds of sites out there that offer royalty-free or special licensed stock photos. The one that I like is Pexels, P-E-X-E-L-S, .com. And they've just got all kinds of images that you can sort through, and you can use these freely as long as you're not profiting off them. So you can, as long as you're not selling the images or putting them on a site that you are selling things on, making money off of, these are totally fine to use. And they've got all kinds of stuff. So yeah, all kinds of tools out there. Let's see, where am I? And then my final tip is that fewer features are better, at least right now. So it is very easy to come up with this grand and glorious idea that has 27 features and things you can do. But we're in a 12-week class, and we're already about a quarter of the way through it. So start small. Build something simple, something basic, meet the requirements. And then once you meet the requirements, then make it better. Add a new feature, redo that thing that you're not quite happy with. Add a new page, start another project entirely. Just start small, don't overcomplicate things. Keep it simple, and then you can get better and expand from there. Almost done. Finishing touches. When your project's done, first of all, you want to be absolutely sure it runs on somebody else's computer. For two reasons. One, if you have somebody else test your project, it allows you to get some additional feedback and make your project better. But the really important one is that it's very easy to make a mistake where your project runs on your computer and your computer alone.
there's almost always one or two people every single session that turn in a project that does not run when I pull it down, because somewhere in their code they've done something that is specific to their computer. The most common example of this is something called an absolute link, where they put in there, my CSS file is located, when they're linking their HTML and their CSS file, they say something like, the link is equal to C:/ Brian's computer / project / my dev project / styles.css. Well, that only exists on my computer. So as soon as you download my project, it doesn't work because you don't have that folder on your computer. And now the project doesn't work at all. You don't want to be that person. So test it on another computer. And I would strongly encourage, like in week 11 or 12, that you all trade off during class and everybody downloads everybody's project and tries them out. About 2 weeks before the end of class, we're going to email out a form to you, and it's just going to be a simple form that's like name, contact details, and a link to your GitHub portfolio, and or specifically the repository. And so that link is how we find your project. We'll download it, we'll put it on our computer, we'll run it and test it, and that's how we verify that you meet the requirements. And the deadline is firm. Unfortunately, I forgot to look what that is before starting this presentation, but it's the Friday of week 12. It's in your syllabus. No, I'm sorry. No, you guys are different. I believe it's a Tuesday or Wednesday. I apologize for not looking that up before starting this recording. But anyway, it's due in the afternoon, 12:01 p.m., right afternoon. And that's a sharp deadline. Like, it has to be in by that time because we start reviewing projects right after it, and there's going to be several projects that we have to review, and we need to get them done. So how do we review them? It's pretty straightforward. First of all, it's reviewed by both program staff, myself, as well as potentially some volunteer mentors. And it's pass-fail. So it's, do you meet the requirements? If yes, then you pass. If not, then you don't. So all those requirements that I talked about on the second or third slide, if you can go through all those and say, yes, I've got that, yes, I've got that, and so on and so forth, then you're good to go. And we don't want this to be some like unknown, like guessing project. You are completely within your rights and expected even to show your project to your mentor and say, does this pass? Like, they can look through it and say, yes, I agree, this all meets the requirements. So you should be able to submit your project with confidence, knowing that it meets the requirements. But again, one thing I want to emphasize is that the most important thing is not, do you pass this class? It's, did you learn something, and do you have something to show for yourself? Like, you can meet the minimum requirements of Code Louisville, pass, and like an employer is going to look at your stuff and think, well, this isn't great if you didn't go that extra step. Like, we want people to build lots of projects. We want people to go way beyond the minimum requirements and have more Git commits and more features and all kinds of stuff. So that's the hope, is that everybody will be able to easily meet our requirements and then go way beyond it. And then kind of related to that is a catch-all that I always have to put in here, is that I reserve judgment that any project that very clearly does not demonstrate an understanding of the purpose of this class will not pass. That is a scarier statement than it sounds like. I've had to invoke this, I think, 4 times over the course of literally about 2,000 projects. And this is, all this means is I've had people turn in projects where they clearly didn't understand what they were doing. They just copied and pasted code without knowing what it was doing, or they technically had some very loose definition of responsive design or mobile first or something like that, but they clearly did not understand it. And I even called those people up and like, hey, explain your project to me. And when they couldn't, I had to say, yeah, I'm sorry, you clearly didn't learn all this. So I have to put that in there just as a catch-all. But again, I've only had to pull that card like maybe 4 times in the past 4 years. So yeah, so that's my presentation. And again, I hope that you all pick something of interest and something you like to build, and that this is something that you want to work on and expand and do additional projects with, or expand on the project or do another project after this one. So again, if you have any questions, your mentors are generally your best place to go, first person to ask. But you can reach out to me on Slack at any time, and happy to answer questions, anything like that. And yeah, I think that's about all I got. So enjoy the rest of your class. Enjoy um, the rest of the course, and use Slack often. Stay in touch. Ask lots of questions, and yeah, have a good night. Thanks, everybody.